it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, we're going to learn how to crochet the Ocean Drive blanket. This is a really beautiful corner-to-corner rectangle blanket, and we are using some self-striping yarn to make it really easy to give it lots of different colors without having to change the colors ourselves. So it's going to kind of like display the colors on its own. However, you could make this in some variegated yarn, some solids, and the particular yarn I use, which we're going to talk about in a minute, comes in tons of colors and different self-striping and variegated colorways as well. We are also going to be learning how to create width and height if you need to change the dimensions. And speaking of the dimensions, the ones that I have here that we're going to be working on, the width of this blanket is about 32 inches wide, and the height of the blanket is about 50 inches tall. So let's get started. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, a ruler or tape measure is super helpful so you can measure as you go along if needed to get the size and dimensions that you need. You'll also need a removable stitch marker. The fact that it's removable is helpful so that you can put it on and take it off at the end. You'll also need a 6.5 millimeter K crochet hook. And then the yarn we're going to be using is Red Heart with Love stripes, and I'm going to be using the Sandbar stripe colorway. That's shades of this bright aqua, gray, beige, and cream. It's very beachy looking. I'm going to use 6 skeins of this. Each skein is 223 yards, 204 meters, 5 ounces, and 141 grams. As a side note, it does come in die lot, so the die lot is right here to the left of this barcode. If you're using multiple skeins of the same colorway like I am, make sure your die lot numbers match. Now, one thing I wanted to note is that the With Love stripes, now let me just grab one here. The With Love stripes are a smaller skein than the With Love solid colors. As you can see, these are 223 yards. This is 370 yards for the solids. Just as a side note too, if you have a solid, you don't need 6 skeins because it's going to be, but you'll need 6 skeins of the stripes, which is 223 yards, okay? So just as a side note. Now, if you need to substitute yarn, which I get that question a lot, just look for a yarn that recommends the 6.5 millimeter K crochet hook. We are going to be using the recommended hook size for this, and is a 4 medium on the yarn weight scale. Our blanket, because we're doing a rectangle corner-to-corner blanket, will be divided into 3 parts. We're going to do the first part to establish width, okay? We're going to start from one corner and come outward and upward till we get the width that we need. Then for the second part of our tutorial, we're going to learn how to do the next part and work the height of the blanket to get the height that we want. And then we're going to finish it off by closing off the corner for the third part, okay? So let's do the first part together where we're going to establish the width. So what we need to do is put a slip knot on our hook. We're going to wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Next, what we're going to do, let me just zoom in so you can see everything up close, is we're going to chain 6. So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then what we're going to do is work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and work a double crochet. So to make a double crochet, wrap yarn around hook, insert it into that 4th chain from the hook, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, okay? Then we're going to work a double crochet into each of the next 2 chains. So work a double crochet in the next chain and a double crochet in the next chain, which is also the last chain, okay? So the first little block is complete now. We have a little block here, and that is going to be the bottom corner of our blanket, okay? So then what we need to do is chain 6 once again. This is also considered to be row 1, okay? So we're going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And let me pull a little bit more yarn out of here. Whenever you're making a large project like this, these center pull balls of yarn are so helpful. So we did a chain 6, and this is technically the beginning of row 2. So then what we want to do is once again work a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. This loop here doesn't count again. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Work your double crochet. And you're going to work a double crochet in each of the next 2 chains as well. Okay, so double crochet and double crochet. Okay, now this part, when people are doing corner to corner, can get a little tricky, but I like to use my tail as kind of my guideline, okay? So you're gonna have to turn this little block that you made before, and the way to remember that is just make sure that tail is pointing downward, okay? That's how I remember. So you're gonna turn that block, and this was our turning chain, remember? So that created a space. What we're gonna do is work a slip stitch into that turning chain space. So wrap the yarn around the hook and bring up the loop. Bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. And then what we're going to do is work one more block for row 2. So what we want to do is chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And in that same turning chain space, you're going to work 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so right now it should sort of look like a boxy heart so far at this time, okay? So then what you're going to do is, technically row 2 is complete. So we have row 1 was this first block, these 2 blocks were row 2. So we're going to repeat what we just did, repeat row 2 over and over, but we're going to work a row or 2 together just so you get the hang of it, okay? So then what we're going to do, once again, to start a new row, you want to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Next, we're going to work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. Same thing we did before. And again, this loop does not count. So go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and work your double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. Work a double crochet in the next chain and work a double crochet into the next chain. Okay, so now we're going to join our blocks. So remember that tail, when you turn, make sure that tail is pointing downward. I always use that tail to help guide me. Sometimes on other projects, I'll weave my tails in just to get them out of the way, but for corner to corner, I always leave that tail intact to help guide me of where it needs to be positioned, okay? So then what we're going to do is join with a slip stitch in that turning chain space of that block right next to it. So join with a slip stitch and then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get a little bit more yarn here. And I have to say, it's very exciting when you have these self-striping yarns and they start to change. So we're going to be doing the cream soon. I always find that to be very exciting. It keeps the project interesting and fun when the colors are changing all by themselves for you. Okay, so we're going to work 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. Just like that. Now we're going to join this block to the next block next to it in that turning chain space. So work a slip stitch in the turning chain space. Once again, chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And work your 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so what you're going to do is just repeat that row over and over and over again until your blanket bottom is as wide as you want it to be. I also wanted to mention, so if you lay it down here, here's your tail. You can use that tail as your marker again. You're going to work that row over and over and over again until your blanket, this is the bottom corner, is as wide as you want it to be. So just keep repeating that row. I'm going to go ahead and repeat my rows, and the colors will start changing soon, and it's very exciting. But you just want to use that tail again to just determine that bottom corner, and just keep working your rows until it's as wide as you need it to be. If you're not sure how big of a blanket you want to make, hop on over to the Fiber Flux blog. I'll put the link down below, and I have a helpful chart on common blanket sizes. So if you wanted to make it for a twin size bed or king size bed or a baby blanket or a receiving blanket or a lap blanket or something like that, all of those general sizes are on there. Now, Sometimes sizings can vary a little bit, but those are just really basic general guidelines, and it's a helpful chart. So I'll put the link down below for that. So we're going to keep repeating this row over and over again until we get the width that we want. Okay, so I've been working my rows to get my width established, and I have about 36 inches across here. Now, just to give you an idea of the yarn that I used, again, we're using the With Love stripes. I used 2 full skeins of this to get my width. Then I'm going to use 2 full skeins for the next section, and then 2 of the remaining 2 skeins to close it back up. So if you're trying to kind of judge your yarn, use a third for this width part, a third for the next part, and a third for the last part. Okay. So I just sometimes it's hard to estimate yarn when you're just kind of working through the rows. The next thing we need to do is move on to the second part of our tutorial. This is where it gets pretty exciting because we now have our width established and we are going to get some height established next. So for this part, you're going to need some of your yarn. Again, we're going to use 2 full skeins for this next section, okay, to get our height. You're also going to need your hook, obviously, and grab a stitch marker like we talked about earlier in the video. So to begin, let's go back here. This is where we left off. This was the very last block I worked. Now, to get that rectangular shape and to get that column-shaped height that we need, now before we were increasing on either side, now we're going to increase on one side and decrease on the other side. That's going to give us that rectangular shape. If we just started decreasing, we would create a square. But because we're doing a rectangle, we're going to do an increase on one side and a decrease on the other side, okay? Now to keep things super duper easy, let's start our row the way we have been for all these rows behind us. Okay, we're gonna start our row the way we've been doing it for every other row so far. So what we need to do is chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're gonna work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. Remember, this loop doesn't count. 1, 2, 3, and 4, work a double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook, work a double crochet in the next chain. Now this will all look very, very familiar because we've been doing this already. Okay, so this part is very easy and we've already done it. Okay, now we're going to turn our work so that we can join these boxes together, or tiles or squares, whatever you want to call them. So we're going to join in the turning chain space with a slip stitch, same thing we've been doing. And then we're going to work across the row the same way. So let's do a few together. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Join with a slip stitch into that next square. And same thing, chain 3, and we're just going to do this all the way across. So this part will be very, very familiar. There's only one slight change for the section that we're doing now, okay? And that is at the end of the row, okay? So just work your row the way you've been working. Work your 3 double crochets, join, chain 3 to start the new square, 3 double crochets. All right, so I'm going to let you kind of work over this row. And when we get towards the end of the row, I'm going to show you how to decrease at the end of the row so we can start getting that rectangular shape. So go ahead and work across the row and we'll rejoin in just a moment. All right, just coming up to the end of the row, I just have one more block to work. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, same thing we've been doing. And work your 3 double crochets in that turning chain space to finish off the row. And then we're going to join in the turning chain space of the block next to it. And this is where things are going to change a little bit. So we want to decrease this now. So instead of doing our last 3 double crochets and doing the chain 6 and bringing it back over, what we're going to do now you can see these 2 blocks are sitting side by side and they're kind of flat. We are going to turn our work. So our blanket's growing a little bit, so I got some back here. And then we're going to work a slip stitch in each of these stitches across. So these 3 double crochets that we just worked, we're going to work a slip stitch, insert the hook, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, insert, bring it through, in the next stitch, insert, bring it through in the next stitch. So we just slip stitched across, and then you can kind of turn your work so that it's facing upward. Now we have this like 90-degree angle. That's the corner, bottom corner of our blanket now. And now we can turn it so it's more upright and chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and work 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. So 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, and 3 double crochet. And then you just work the row the way we normally have. Join with a slip stitch and then work it across. Now, before we continue though, I like to straighten this out when I get my 90-degree angle here. We just decreased on this side. So in order to keep ourselves straight and make sure we're doing the right thing on the right side, grab your stitch marker and you're going to put it on the side where you decreased. That's where I like to do it because it's something different. So this bright orange stitch marker will remind me to stop and do something different, okay? So I'm going to just put this on the side of the work where I decrease, okay? So we're just going to continue across, working our row the same way and finishing it off. Now, let's lay this out because we're going to continue working upward now. So if you look, I'll just zoom way out here. If you look at our blanket, we now have a bottom edge, okay, with a stitch marker telling us to decrease, and then it continues up to a point, okay? So keep working your rows, doing the decrease that we just did on this end with the stitch marker, and when you get to the other end, do your increase. That was the chain 6, work into the chain, come back down. That will continue to grow this in height. And this will start to get a flat side up the side of your blanket, okay? If you need to re-watch this row in order to repeat it over and over again, you know, feel free to do that. There's a slow motion feature. You can do that as well. So what we're going to do is continue working this row where we increase on this side, decrease on this side until we've used up 2 full skeins of our with love, okay? And then I'm going to show you how to bring it back to the point to finish it off, but we're not going to do that quite yet. So just keep working your row, decreasing on this side, increasing on this side till you have used 2 full skeins of the with love, okay? So I'm going to continue working my rows and then we will rejoin and learn how to do the next part. All right, so we've made some amazing progress. Now let me just show you. This is the bottom of our blanket here. Now see, I have my stitch marker. So we now have 2 right angle bottom corners of our blanket and the colors are displaying so beautifully. We have worked our width in part 1 and then we just worked our rectangle section. So we increased on one side, we decreased on the other side, and we worked all the way up. We now have like a triangular point at the top here. So now what we need to do, I've worked through most of the 2 skeins. I have a little bit left here, but we're going to grab our last 2 skeins of yarn here and we're going to start. Now if you can see, we still have this like angle here. So what we need to do now is bring it up to a point so we have a full rectangle, okay? Now this is super easy. We're going to just decrease at both ends now. So let me just, I was coming up to the end of the row here with my last little block. Let me zoom in and we're going to work through this last section together and decrease at either side. Now we've already been decreasing on one of the sides, so it's really not going to be very new of a skill, but I'm going to show you anyway in case you wanted to see it. So let's work that last block, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then what we're going to do is work 3 double crochets into that last turning chain space, 1, 2, 3, join with a slip stitch into that last block there into the turning chain space. And then we're going to turn, and then we're going to work our slip stitches in each of these 3 double crochets, just like we did before. So work a slip stitch into that first one, slip stitch into the next one, slip stitch into the next one. Then we're going to work a slip stitch into the turning chain space, and turn, turn, turn. And then we can continue across our row. So go ahead and chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and work your 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. And then just continue the row as you normally would, okay? So you're going to join with a slip stitch to join the 2 blocks together, chain 3, work your 3 double crochets into that turning chain space, and so forth, all the way across the row, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and work across the row, and then, whoops, and then when we get to the end of our row, I'll show you how to decrease at the end of the row too, just so you can see it done, okay? So just keep continuing across, and when we get towards the end, we're going to finish off the row and decrease on that side as well. All right, just coming up to the end of the row, work my 3 double crochets to complete this last block. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to join it. Now see, we're at that other side where we already have that flat edge. We're going to join it to the other block with a slip stitch. And then we can get started on the row again. So what you're going to do is just keep repeating the row we just did, decreasing at the beginning and at the end of each row until you bring it up to a point. So when we get close to that point at the top, I'm going to rejoin and show you how to just finish off the whole blanket. So grab your last 2 skeins of yarn and use them to finish up your blanket. So we are at the very top point of our blanket now. So I'm just slip stitching over. We are just continuing as normal here. And then you can slip stitch into that turning chain space. And now let's work that last block, okay? So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, work your 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. And then to finish off the blanket, you're going to join into the turning chain space of that block right next to it. And then you have your 90-degree corner angle here of our blanket, okay? So what we need to do now is just cut the yarn, and as you can see, I just have a teeny tiny little bit here, and we're going to fasten off. So wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop, and then all we're left with is some ends. So grab your scissors and your tapestry needle. And when you have self-striping yarn like this, when we weave in the ends, we want to stay in the same color area here. So I have a gray tail. I'm going to try and weave it in so that it stays in that area. If I go into some of these other colors, I'm going to see this gray line kind of traveling through my work. So we want to just sort of keep it in the same area if possible. That's not always possible, but it will definitely sort of blend in a little bit more if we do that. So go in one direction through the center of your stitches. Now, corner to corner like this is reversible. So you want to just try to keep it through the middle. If you try to go onto the back or something like that, it will definitely show. So I went in one direction and then came back in the other direction, and that will sort of help lock that tail into place. Now give it a little tug. And we have our ends, okay? Now, if you did multiple balls of yarn like I did, you're going to have ends all through here. And then also remember when we did our stitch marker to help us remember what side we were on, you want to take that out now too, that your blanket is finished. So go ahead and weave in all the ends that are left on your blanket. So our ends are all woven in and our blanket is complete. It looks amazing and I cannot wait to use it. So that is how you crochet the Ocean Drive blanket. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again!